Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sanyavadi Astachari Shatarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sanyavadi Astachan Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravaktavinda Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravaktavinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravaktavinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Prajaranjana Yasodanandana Prajaranjana Yasodanandana Prajaranjana Yamanachira Vanachari Yamunachira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopijana Ballabha Girivardhari Yasodanandana Prajaranjana Yasodhana Rajadanandana Yavoratira Vachari Yavoratira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Balaba Girivardhari Gopijana Balaba Girivardhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ramaramba Hare Hare. Go Premanandi, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Shamasundar Ki Jai. Shri Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtanam Ki Jai. Shri Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Transcendental Prashadam Distribution Ki Jai. Go Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol, all glorious to the assembled devotees, all glorious to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glorious to Sri Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadine Namaste Shishanyavadi Astachade Shatardine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vancha kalpaturubhyas cha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuramilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam. Hare Krishna. Good morning, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. We welcome you this morning and offer our humble obeisances, our blessings to all of you, and pray that the Lord will always protect you in these times when we don't know what is going to be let's say, the next thing that may happen in our lives, which is always the case, actually. Life is really for preparation. Lifetime in preparation is one nice chapter in the Prabhupada Lilamrita called Lifetime in Preparation. Prabhupada was preparing for his mission, give us all this chance to connect with the Parampara, to connect with Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement, and ultimately with Radha and Krishna. So lifetime, we're in preparation. Whatever happens in our life, sometimes it may not be so pleasing to our present consciousness. But whatever happens in our life, try to understand that the hand of the Lord is working. The Lord is preparing situations for our preparation, for our own Krishna conscious progress. The Lord arranges different situations to remind us, or to sometimes even almost force us to turn to Him, to remember our relationship with Krishna. We all have an eternal relationship with Krishna. Sometimes we forget. Therefore, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, again and again, reminds us how to remember Him in various material circumstances, happiness or distress, all the various dualities, plus the various, you could say, objects or various features of this material world, in the form of trees or mountains, and elements, air, the mind, and so on. Every various aspect of what we experience or perceive within our material world, in our material lives, how to relate everything to Krishna. In distressful situations, challenging situations, are also to be understood as being a part of that, just like our present situation, where there's many restrictions in different places of the world due to the spreading of the coronavirus, or whatever it is, different challenges are there. We can spend our time trying to analyze or grapple with these various situations. But the real aspect of it is that these are opportunities for us to realize that we're not in control, that Krishna is the ultimate controller. However the material energy may work, however the influences of Kali may be, or the influences of living entities under the influence of Maya and different modes of nature may appear to be manipulating the situation in various ways. Ultimately, everything is in the hands of Krishna. No one is independent. Even the greatest, you could say, reformers or the greatest changers in this world, persons who apparently affect change in this world, are merely instruments in the hands of the Lord. Of course, according to their karma, we find ourselves in different instrumental positions. But everything has its instrumental aspect, and that ultimately is the modes of material nature, under the modes of nature, and the modes of nature are under Magic Shena Prakriti Sute Sachacha, under Krishna's direction. Nothing moves without the will of the Lord. And so if you always try to refer back to this, of course, we're unlike, following the thread of the Bhagavad Gita, where initially Arjuna was considering what's the point of fighting if everything's done by you. But that's not the point. The point is that we are here to play our proper position, to realize our real position in relationship with Krishna, not just in relationship with the modes of nature. That's still conditional, although it's a step in the right direction, realizing how the nature is working under Krishna's direction, and we should play our part within that mode, within those modes, according to our nature, acquired nature. But that's like Varnashram or something, is the beginning. But our ultimate nature is that we are simply the servants of the servant. We're instruments for the pleasure of the Lord. We exist for the pleasure of the Lord, really, spiritually. In the material world, we think we exist for our own pleasure. We think the world is revolving around me. Krishna consciousness means to see the world revolving around Krishna, not around me. So this transformation, the scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, pure devotees, their purpose is to evoke transformation in us, from seeing ourselves in the center to seeing Krishna in the center. So Krishna is all the time, and his agents are all the time, trying to not just remind us, but arranging circumstances which help to evoke this change in consciousness. And before we start to act according to our required natures, and sometimes out of control, sometimes being controlled by those natures, and those natures are sometimes a little bit too much controlled by passion and ignorance, and we get carried away, and we have problems. All the problems in the world that we experience, what we call problems, confrontational situations, unpleasant situations, disease situations, and whatever it is, subtle or gross, are all due to the effects of the modes of nature. And according to our identification with those modes, or our being controlled by those modes, we will be affected accordingly. But actually all that's going on in our mind and body in this sense is external to the soul. It's just that we're identifying with it so much. As we identify with a cinema show and become sometimes incredibly affected, similarly we become completely affected by the show of our mind and the body, which is acting accordingly, and other bodies around us, which of course are all reflected on the mental plane anyway. We get completely carried away with it. It's kind of every living entity in the universe is completely carried away, except for those, of course, who are transcendentally situated, Otherwise, we're carried away by our minds, and we expect the whole world to revolve around to try to satisfy my mind. And everyone around us should be a servant of my mind. And if they're not, then, why aren't they? Are they, they don't like me, or they're impersonal, or whatever we try to labelize it. But we see it like this, Of course, in the babyhood stage of which we're in spiritual life, there is a necessity to a certain extent of bearing that in mind and trying to help the living entity get free of this situation which we're in. Identifying with our mind sometimes, which is so overwhelming, we can't see beyond it. We're basically controlled by it, despite some endeavor or desire to become Krishna conscious. The mind just gets us, and we try to get everyone else on board with that. And as I say, sometimes they use the word "pick your brains." Expect everyone else to answer all of our so-called problems or necessities, urges, etc. And the list goes on and on. Not realizing that may be required in order to keep going, in order to keep the, let's say, little bit of flame of faith burning, but it's not the solution. The solution to our problems is as clear as a bell in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You don't get much, you could say, emphasis placed upon in the Bhagavatam. You may find it in the Gita and in other scriptures a lot. Emphasis placed upon material adjustments and various, let's say, mixed kind of methodology. Srimad Bhagavatam is aimed at the essence, the solution to all problems, which is purely and wholly and solely to take shelter of Krishna and to hear and chant about Krishna. This is, I don't know if it still is, it was, it maybe still is, World Shravanam Week, I think, in ISKCON, a week for hearing and chanting. Now, I haven't taken advantage of that personally, but it's a good idea to have these incentives, just like we had World Holy Name Festival, and we had the Bhadra campaign, and we'll have the Prabhupada Book Marathon, and different events during the year to inspire us to turn up or move up gear, turn up gear a little bit, be a little bit more absorbed on the path of transcendence, on our real business. Get off the mental platform, the physical platform a little bit more than usual, and absorb ourselves in the mission of Lord Chaitanya, or in the process of rectification or transformation of consciousness. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. Association in this regards can never be underestimated. Appropriate association, not just association within the modes of nature. Naturally, Svagati is going to be there according to one's nature. But if it just remains according to one's conditioned nature, it's not going to help us much to get out of the modes. To get free of being a drunkard is not very helpful to associate with drunkards. We have to get association with those who can help us to get free from our false identification. So we have to associate that. Bhagavatam is especially in this regards, is the transcendental literature that by hearing which we can become freed of the effects of the modes of nature. So today we're going to read one verse or two, maybe, from the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 9th canto. We're going to ask Vaccination Prabhu if he could kindly share the screen. 9th canto, I can't remember the verse number, here it is. Do you know the verse number there? It's 9:8:23. Not very often. 9:8:23. Now this verse is, let me go to my screen. Spoken by I think it's the sons of Sagara. when they meet Lord Kapilades. They're searching for the sacrificial horse. And anyway, let's not worry about that part of it. Let's go on to the verse, and you should be able to see it on the screen now. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Hare Krishna. It's a little difficult repeating. I'll just read it through and we can read it at the same time if you wish. Tang twang ahang jnana kanang svabhava. Well, we repeat it once. Huh? Nice tune. Tang twang ahang jnana kanang svabhava. Pradvasta maya gunabheda mohai. Pradvasta maya gunabheda mohai. Sanandanadyaya munibhivibhavyam. Sanandanadyaya munibhivibhavyam. Katang vimudha paribhavayami. Katang vimudha paribhavayami. Let's look at those word for words. Tam, that personality, tvam, unto you. Aham, I. Gyanaganam, your lordship, who are concentrated knowledge. Svabhava, by spiritual nature. Padvasta, free from contamination. Maya guna, caused by the three modes of material nature. Maya guna. The guna, three modes, guna, maya, material nature, illusory nature. Beda mahi, by exhibition of the bewilderment of differentiation. Very relevant to what we were speaking just now. Sanandana adyayi, by such personalities as the four Kumaras. Sanat Kumar, Sanak, Sanandana, and Sanat. Munibi, by such great sages. Vibhavyam, worshipable. Katam, how? Vimuda, being fooled by the material nature. Paribhavyami, Bhavyami, can I think of you? So, translation is not a verse which is very often, a section of Bhagavatam very often referred to. And it's certainly not a verse which is very often discussed, if at all. But it's interesting. Oh, my Lord, sages, freed from the influence of the three modes of material nature, sages such as the four Kumaras, Sanat, Sanaka, Sananda, and Sanat, are able to think of you, who are concentrated knowledge. But how can an ignorant person like me think of you? The word svabhava refers to one's own spiritual nature or original constitution, svabhav, original nature. When situated in its original position, the living entity is unaffected by the modes of material nature. Sagunan, samati chaitan, brahmabhuyaya kalpate. It's in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And I'll just read that verse because It's not fully mentioned there, but it's a very important verse, 26. And it goes, Mam cha yoga vicharana bhakti yogena sevati suganam samati chaitan brahma bhuya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, means, and sometimes it says it never falls down in any circumstances. That means we don't desist, it's completely absorbed in devotional service. That's not our position, probably. But this is the position of one who is fully engaged, constantly engaged, the Mahatmas, in devotional service. And that's what we're practicing. But once transcends the modes of nature and then thus comes to the level of Brahman, which means spirit, doesn't mean you become merged into the Brahma Jyoti. Sometimes we get the wrong impression when we hear about Brahman. Realization doesn't mean necessarily Mayavad or Brahmavad realization only. It refers to one who's actually seeing things on the spiritual platform and not only seeing things according to the modes of nature. As soon as one is freed from the influence of three modes of nature, he's situated on the Brahman platform. Vivid examples of personalities thus situated are the four Kumaras and Narada Muni. Such authorities can by nature understand the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but a conditioned soul not freed from the influence of material nature is unable to realize the Supreme. We can talk about it as much as we like. We can repeat as much as we like. We can claim what we wish. We can identify with whatever religion or movement, the Hare Krishna movement or whatever it is we identify with. But to realize the Supreme is another thing. The Lord reveals himself. It's not by some mechanical process that we're able to see the Lord. It's not even by a mechanical process that we're able to come to Asvabhav. Prabhupada writes very clearly on purport in the first canto, it's not by the mechanical process of hearing and chanting that one is able to attain this Svabhav or to awaken our dormant relationship with Krishna. It's only by the mercy of the Lord. And the Lord's mercy, well, it's available to all of us. Because it may seem that he's giving mercy in different ways, which he is. And it may seem sometimes he's giving more mercy, depending on our perspective, to some than he is to others, but it's not like that. He's reciprocating accordingly. And on the path of spiritual life and self-realization, that mercy of the Lord, he reveals himself accordingly. Reward, reveal, whichever. And he may reveal himself in different ways which we do not recognize. But ultimately, with the realization of the Lord and the sense of our eternal relationship with the Lord, that's not such an easy thing. That really requires transcendence. It's just like now, I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but I'm in France and the sky is very cloudy, completely covered. We can't see the sun at all. We can see the influence of the sun. We may, if we don't know the existence of the sun at all, we would not know that this light that we are experiencing right now is a result of the sun, because we can't see the sun, and if we've never seen it, we will have no idea that it has anything to do with an object outside of our perception. So similarly in this material, whatever little knowledge, whatever little light, whatever little experiences we have, ultimately are perverted reflections of the Absolute. But because we're under the influence of the clouds of the material nature, we cannot see the origin, we can only see the effects, which are the perverted reflection of the origin or the cause. The cause of all causes is Sarvakarna, Karnam is Krishna. We cannot see Krishna because we're completely absorbed in the modes of nature and just perceiving and conceiving of action and reaction within the material energy only. The science is entirely based upon this principle of illusion. Most philosophers are based on this principle, and unfortunately most religions have also debased themselves to such a basic, at least compromised understanding of the absolute. And individually speaking, everyone pretty much is still under the clouds, unable to see the sun. So unless you rise above, you can hear about it, or we can hear about it from authorities. To what degree we accept it, that's our choice to some extent. Or we can rise above the modes. And rising above the clouds, and many of you have been in airplanes, if not all, once a plane rises above the clouds, the sky is clear. It's a clear sky, it's like the Brahma Jyoti or something. But in that clear sky, there is the sun. Of course, it depends which time of the day it is you're flying. But in the daytime, you'll see the sun. And at nighttime, you'll see the moon. It depends again what month, time of the month, and so many things. Basically speaking, you can see above the modes above the clouds, above the modes. Things are clear. You're no longer affected by what's going on. I remember one time I was on a plane flying from Malaysia to India, and we had to divert the course about 500 miles to the north across, I don't know where it was, maybe south, I can't remember. We had to go on a big diversion. And the reason being there was a huge cyclone in the Bay of Bengal, which later on tore into Bangladesh and Burma, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed or something like that. It was a massive cyclone. We were above, but if we'd gone straight on, we would come under the influence. They had to go around to the side. So we couldn't see what's going on underneath. It's just some dark clouds. It doesn't look like very much. But underneath there is a tremendous storm causing havoc in people's lives. Huge waves and winds and rains and floodings and so on going on under the clouds. So the material nature is like that, where when you're under it, that's all you know. You do not have any, experience of being above it. And you're basically struggling to survive under those storms. So people are under the storm of the material energy, struggling. We finish off this purport. One must rise above the influence of the modes of nature. One who stays within the influence of the three modes is unable to understand, unable. One cannot. We're not able to understand. It's just not possible. We don't have the Takshri Krishna Namadina Baba Dvaimendra. Sevan Mukhi Jivadur Swayameva Sprachita. With these materialistic methods, we can't see. We all know from our little understanding, if you have had a little understanding, our senses are limited. And even material sciences understanding that we can only perceive within a certain wavelength or a certain range, both visually or from the ears or whatever it is. We can only experience a certain sensation. Other living entities may be experiencing something outside of our grasp of perception, whether it's color, whether it's sound, form, everything. We have a certain range of perception. And outside of that, we either can't see it properly or we can't see it at all. So that's a limitation which we know we all have, one of the effects of being under the influence of nature. Now, I'm going to now go on a little bit from that verse to discuss a little bit about the Bhagavad Gita and some verses in the Bhagavad Gita which remind us. There's interesting features. Sometimes we hear classes, and they're correct also, statements that the living entity is one of the doers. Statement there in the Bhagavad Gita, there are 5 causes of action, or 5 doers, and the living entity is one of them. But then again, we hear elsewhere, I'll read some verses in a minute, where we see differently. So we're going to try to look into this a little bit deeper, maybe not very deep, I'm not very qualified in that regards, but maybe a little bit, and to remind us, to not to be so much absorbed in whatever we have received in the form of this mind and body by the grace of Krishna due to our karma, what we've received as a form of the mind and the body, to rise above that a little bit. So I'm going to start with a famous verse, and you don't need to put it on the screen. The devotees have their Bhagavad Gitas, they can look it up. There are many more. I only started preparing this class 10 minutes before we started, so I didn't locate other verses, but I've located 4 relevant verses. Krishna reminds Arjuna that you're not the real doer. What you do, and don't forget what you do. Which we see with our present sense.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, sorry to interrupt. It might be that the pages turning is really blocking out your voice. It's I think it's just when maybe the microphone is quite sensitive there. So
yeah, I may have had it on top of the microphone. Thank you for that. Because I don't know where the microphone is on the computer. So it may have been, I may have been resting. I've just moved the computer so that won't happen. I hope. Let me know if it happens again immediately, please. Thank you for that. So, yes, I can't go back to where we were, but I'll continue. So the reminders through the Bhagavad Gita are to remind us that we're not the real doer. This whole idea of thinking I'm the doer is, we could say, the cause of our remaining in this material world. When we're young kids, and some of you may still be young kids, or maybe acting as a young kid still, we're so much on the platform, I am the doer, look what I've done, and so on and so forth. And why aren't you recognizing what I have done? You know, we get very upset sometimes when people don't recognize us. I did my part, but you didn't recognize it. And on we go in this way. Okay, from a mundane point of view, we could say that's not unusual. And to a certain extent, we could say we should try to recognize it just to encourage or just to appreciate the efforts of others. But in the higher picture, it's kind of inconsequential to the real business of the soul. Because here, Krishna, now there's a famous verse. Now this is it okay now, Asika?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this is in the 3rd chapter, and if you've got your Gitas, it's a good idea. And I'm only speaking for the sake of repetition, but it's, and I don't do it myself, but it's a good idea to have your Bhagavad Gitas with you as much as you can. Maybe not when you go to the toilet or something like that, but as much as possible, it's a good idea to keep the Bhagavad Gita at hand. All good Christians keep their Bible at hand. All good Muslims keep their Quran at hand. So all good Christians should keep their Bhagavad Gita at hand, maybe too. So this is a famous verse, it's text 27 of the 3rd chapter. I think most of you are familiar, if you've done any, let's say, Bhakti Shastri or preliminary courses in ISKCON, maybe even the Guru Disciple course, I don't know. That one has it in, but most of the preliminary courses will include this verse because it's one of those verses in relationship with our conditioned nature in this world. And the verse reads in English, the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the 3 modes of material nature. So another elements come in here, ahankara, or the false ego, ahankara vimudatma. The word vimuda or ahankara, vimuda can mean various things. Muda means fool, and vimuda can be big fool. Here the translation is bewildered. So fools are bewildered. We're all fools, bewildered by the modes of nature, and a big fool, vimuda, not just a muda, a vimuda. We're bewildered, completely bewildered by the modes of nature sometimes, if not always. And the aspect, what is the element, the material element too, in a sense, which is behind this bewilderment, is the false ego. We can say it's Maya, Prabhu, but in one sense it's not Maya. Maya is just providing a kind of a platform or an environment in which we can travel on our bewildered journey. And we become entangled. Of course, she covers our remembrance, etc. But that's because of our false ego. False ego is the first thing. When we come under the influence of the false ego, then everything else from there develops. False ego. Ego is not wrong. We all have ego. In the real sense of the term, ego refers to identity. It's our identity. When we say false ego, it's a false identity. So in the material world, everyone has ahankara. We're all under ahankara, false identity, and the consequent developments from therein. But we're all under the influence of the false ego. Now we can't say, in a sense, the false ego is an external element too, but it's only in action as long as the soul embraces or takes shelter of that. Becomes attracted, let's say, to that energy of that element of false identity, of identifying oneself with the material world and not with the spiritual world. So this is the false ego causes the living entity to think, I am the doer. Whether we're a Hiranyakashipu or whether we're an amoeba or a germ, everyone is identifying with their particular conditioning from top to bottom. And the more we identify as being the doer, the more we become implicated in action and reaction, causing further material bodies. Karma, by the way, the definition, practical definition of karma, is that which causes the development of future material bodies. So we're all, basically speaking, just causing our own material future bodies. So in that sense, we are the doer. But we're not the doer in the sense of actually creating the material body. Because of our false ego, because of our identification with this material world, we are thus the cause of future material bodies. If we don't identify with this material world, we're not considered to be working in this world anymore. We become free of the effects because we're acting in such a way as not to cause future material bodies in this material world. But in principle, for the majority, the vast majority of living entities in this world who are identifying with this material energy, are identifying themselves as the doer, as the enjoyer, and so on and so forth, then they are these verses are completely relevant, and we should understand they are still relevant to us. We should see all the nasty things or nice things that we see around us. We say somebody is very beautiful, somebody is very learned, somebody is very nice, whatever. It's not that that's perverted, you could say, reflection of the soul, but it's not actually the soul that we're referring to. It's the effects which that soul is presently under, and which may appear from our perspective only, don't forget, beautiful. It's not beautiful from the perspective of a dog or the perspective of a human being with a different set of senses even. In some cases, they don't even perceive what is perceived by majority of people as beautiful. They don't see that as beautiful at all. They're really under the mode of ignorance. But generally speaking, when there's a beautiful girl, most people recognize it. But what is that beautiful girl? It's just the combination of the modes of nature in a certain way to create a particular form reflected on our eyeballs and perceived within our mental plane. And it happens to be attractive to our sense, our mental state, what we like and what we dislike, etc., which will change according to our karma in due course of time. But in this way, the living entity accepts and rejects this world of duality, or like that. So to understand that everything is created or carried out by the three modes of material nature, which, by the way, later on we'll see, are under the control of Krishna. Let's have a look at the purport to this verse 27. Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform. but there is a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature. The mechanism, gross and subtle, are produced by material nature. And it's the same thing as we're watching a TV or a movie or something. We haven't produced it, but we're identifying with it. And we're affected by it considerably. Produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. No knowledge at all. The vast majority of persons have no knowledge of this whatsoever. And all of the species of life have no knowledge at all. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently. And that is a symptom of his nescience. It's interesting situation when we do something and it's appreciated, or we like it, or somehow or other we get some result, we're very eager to establish that I did it, we did it. Just look at what we did. When something goes wrong, again, depending on the modes of nature, some people will be a little bit more affected by goodness and may admit that they made a mistake. Other people will try to find an excuse for what went wrong, and everything but themselves becomes the cause of the problem. It was because of something else. This happens even on the highest echelons in the material world, the so-called, in our world, and at least in politics, etc. When something goes wrong, they generally blame the previous government, or they blame something other than themselves. There is more or less zero humility involved. Mode of goodness is almost zero. It's all passion and ignorance. And therefore people, have no hope, if they follow such blind leaders, of making any progress to get out of the influence of the modes of nature. They're not leaders at all, they're just bewilderers. Which bewilderer do you want to vote for? Because they're bewildered. Which Vimuda do we want to vote for? Because they don't know what is the goal of life. Or they don't even know that the sun exists beyond the clouds. And they don't know that the goal of life is to transcend the modes of nature. To rise above the margina, be transcendental. We could go back, actually, just before we finish that purport. Otherwise, we'll forget it. There's even way back in the second chapter, perhaps it's text 43 or some 45. Yes, and this is interesting too, because in the second chapter, verse 45, we see that the Vedas, Krishna says, deal mainly with the three modes of nature. O Arjuna, become transcendental to these three modes, be free from all dualities and from all anxiety for gain and safety, and be established in the self. In one of these verses, which is expanded upon in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a series here of, you could say, sutras, which don't go into much detail, but give the purpose, the goal, and then develop how to reach that goal, how to achieve that transcendence is developed throughout the Gita. So we'll go back to verse 27. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently. I did it my way, and Frank Sinatra. And that is a symptom of his nescience, ignorance. Symptom. I did it. How did you do it? Aha. Then we become very proud of how I did it, etc. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Lord. And as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna. So So that's, of course, not generally taught. The Krishna consciousness movement is specifically, knowingly or unknowingly, present for, this is, you could say, foundationally speaking, where its purpose is there to engage our body. In fact, Rupa Goswami describes in Nectar Devotion, this is sadhana bhakti, to engage one's minds and certain senses in the service of the Lord. That's their purpose in Krishna consciousness. Conscious of Krishna, all your activities, be conscious of me, Krishna says. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesh. Here's a good one. Or the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. Bewildered by the false ego. It's very bewildering. It's such a powerful. Why? Because we're part and parcel of Krishna. We have some of the qualities of Krishna. Krishna is the center of everything. You could say, well, boy, he's got a big false ego, that man. Everything is revolving around him. Look at Krishna. He's trying to enjoy everything, right? He's got all these gopis, he's got wives, he's got coward boyfriends, he's got universes. And he's not going to say he's bringing everyone under his influence. He's got such a big false ego. Well, that's a real ego, because that is the reality. Everything does rest on Krishna. Everything does emanate from Krishna. Everything is his energy. Everything is meant for his pleasure. That's just how it is. And we are part and parcel of Krishna. We have a minute, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. We have a minute characteristic of Chaitanya. We have a similar quality to the Lord. But out of all the living entities, there is one supreme, from whom everything else is resting. And we only have a little minute, just like a drop of ocean water, a minute proportion of the qualities of the ocean. We have the qualities, but they're in minute portion, very small, and they can be easily covered over. Like a drop of the ocean can easily be evaporated, easily covered or evaporated. So that little living entity, once we turn away from the whole, we meditate on the land instead of the ocean, you could say, we become evaporated in no time, or swallowed up by something, disappear into the ground. We become insignificant. Our flames, the spark of the fire, when it comes out of the fire, becomes extinguished. Potentially it's still there, but it's covered over. In the case of a spark, it's extinguished. It doesn't blaze anymore. But because of ignorance, we don't see the fact that our so-called achievements in this world are so petty and small. And it's like a dream. It's a dream. Or a baby, a child just playing around with bits of sand and stones thinking it's cooking. It's relevant at that stage, but it's not the reality, which one is meant to be maturing towards. Unfortunately, most people don't make much progress, if any, in that direction of maturing. They remain perpetually nityabada, under the influence of the modes of nature, fighting, conquering over the modes of nature. And we can never do that. Now they want to fly to Mercury, whatever that is, fly to the moon. What's the use of all of this? It's just child's play. They get nothing at all out of it. They're like children trying to cook with sand. They get nothing out of it, except for false ego, increasing false ego, pride. Nothing else whatsoever. A bit of a kick, maybe. But this is not the objective goal. They get a little kick out of it positive. You get a big kick out of it negatively afterwards as well. Mature nature gives us a big boot. It's a kick in their face with boots. And they get it anyway, whether we do it or not, but mature nature does it. Because we're the mudas, we're fools, bewildered by the three modes of nature, not realizing that we're not the controllers, we're not the doers. This world is not here for our manipulative enjoyment. It's here to use in Krishna's service. This body is part of the world, this mind is part of the world, but we have this tiny little characteristic, Ishvara Bhav, of seeing ourselves as the controller, and consequently we get into trouble one after the next. And the methodology of getting out of this illusory, this remuda mentality, is to associate, to hear and chant about the glories of the Lord. This can bring to an end this Bhavushati Chotra Manobi Ramat Kutama Shloka Ganana, but that can bring to an end this sojourn of Baba Road, this birth and death in this material world, action and reaction in this world, which we're presently experiencing, never ending. We're not sick. We're not immaterially we may appear to be, the body does. We're not happy or sad in this world. These are all just reflections on the mental platform, which we identify with and say, I'm happy, I'm not happy, I'm sick, I'm healthy, I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm old, I'm young, I'm black, I'm white, I'm man, I'm woman, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a nothing, or whatever we think. I'm, even the entry into the Brahmajyoti, although partially true, it's not actually, it's still influenced by false ego in a sense. This is not a complete identification, it's only partial. It's not our svabha, only partial. Partial realization is not complete. It's not wrong, but it's not complete. Well, to speak of elevation to heaven, which is one of the biggest entangling snares of the false ego, can come under. Identifying oneself as the enjoyer on a mode, in the mode of goodness on a higher platform, piety and so on, as one's foundation, is not at all the goal of spiritual life. And most religions, unfortunately, seem to have stopped at that point. Some heavenly elevation to be good. Okay, you can go on from that point, but if you stop at that point, one becomes, as we see in the Bhagavad Gita, that this mode of goodness conditions one to want to be the enjoyer. I want to enjoy. And now I'm enjoying better without my sinful reactions. I'm enjoying my good reactions. Thank you, God. Piety. But it doesn't lead to transcendence in of itself, unless one gets the opportunity to associate with a transcendentalist, someone who is above the modes of nature, who can take us from that platform to the spiritual platform. When we come to the Krishna movement, we come with our baggage, so they say. Whatever our conditioned nature is, we bring it with us. If we continue to try to impress our conditioned nature on the process of devotional service or upon those who are practicing devotional service, we will get no end of misunderstandings and no end of failure, in a sense, in actually spreading the mission of Krishna consciousness, what to speak of becoming Krishna conscious. We have to let go of this identity of thinking, I know best, I this, I that, I this, I that. We may have been given, due to our karma, knowledge of certain things or abilities in certain ways, but they belong to Krishna. And we should unconditionally offer those in the service of Krishna. We may not be ready for that. It may take time, but that is the process. Not that I did this, therefore I should be, or I should get, I should have, etc. I should get out of this mentality. That should be we could say the conditional desire to become free of this identification mentality and being completely affected by others and how they react to what we think is, right and wrong. They see it differently. So we clash. Do they have different baggage? We have different baggage. We're both identifying with our baggage. We get upset when somebody doesn't correspond to the way we see it should be done, and we have a problem. Institutionally, individually, and it happens in our own minds, in Kali Yuga particularly, duality is rampant within our own minds as well. With this or that, this or that, this or that, right or wrong, right or wrong. Where our intelligence is pretty much bewildered by the modes of nature or the karma that we're presently experiencing on the mental platform. So we have to hear Arjuna was bewildered. I don't think it's unusual to be a great soul, but for our sake, he also was acting in a bewildered way to show us how do we get out of bewilderment by hearing from real intelligence, hearing or receiving intelligence. Krishna says, Arjuna says to Krishna, now I am bewildered about my duty. I'm completely confused about my duty. Kindly instruct me. Now I must all surrender unto you. Arjuna was bewildered. He realized his intelligence was not solving the problem. He surrendered. That point of surrender, when we accept that direction of Guru Shastra Sadhana, how to engage this continuum. Arjuna was speculating that the proper engagement is, no, I will not fight. This is the best course of action. I heard it from scripture, but that's scripture under the modes of nature. Arjuna, Krishna says, you damn fool. Strong, Pragyavadam, Chapasa say, Gatasam, Agatasam, Chananam, Shochanti Pandidaha. Arjuna, you're just a fool. You're speaking like a learned man, but you're just a Vimuda. You're just bewildered. Wake up, Arjuna. You're not this body. You're eternal spirit soul. Rise above these modes of nature, Arjuna. Arjuna wasn't very quick to take it, but he did eventually. Quick in comparison to ourselves. It took about an hour, but still, there's a few doubts in between. Naturally, there will be. But this we have to understand. We have to realize the adjustment is within us, not the world around us, not in others. They have to change. You have to change. This has to change. That has to change. It doesn't have to change, and it won't change. It will change, but it will change for the worse. It's we who have to change, the way we see it, not what's seen. Nothing wrong with the soul, except for that we're bewildered. Soul is still constitutionally pure, just in this dream state. And it's the process of waking up is the application of the proper means of seeing things. To see things through Shastra Chakra instead of through Air Force ego. Through the eyes of Jnana Timurandasya, through the eyes of the spiritual eyes. It's a hard pill to swallow. It's not easy. But this is the process. It takes time. It takes time. That's why so many systems are there, but they have to progress. It shouldn't be that one gets stuck at a certain level of yoga, a certain level of varnashram, a certain level of piety, maybe necessarily stepping stones, but one has to come eventually to the transcendent path. Srimad Bhagavata. The chanting of the holy names purely, pure chanting and hearing. We have to come to that platform eventually. At least we have to realize it and correct ourselves from being so much controlled and influenced by the temporary effects of the modes of nature. We'll read on one or two more verses. Again, we see in the 5th chapter, text number 14, if you want to read it in the 5th chapter. It's a nice verse. 5:14. The embodied spirit, we're embodied in this material world, master of the city of his body, we consider ourselves the master at least, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of nature. Interesting, isn't it? So it seems like we are doing things like that, influencing others to act. It seems like we're creating activities sometimes, and here we are sometimes. And we certainly, surely I'm creating the fruits of my work. Yes and no. They're being created by material nature, like a mother. You could say, does the child create the toys? Does the child create the false, let's say, the imitation kitchen? Yes, no. Because the child desires it, the mother gives it. The child doesn't really create it. The mother creates it according to the will of the child. Krishna is reciprocating. Krishna is reciprocating. There's some bees flashing on the screen there. Yeah, Krishna is reciprocating with us. And as he does the spiritual path, as they surrender, I reward them accordingly. So he's rewarding the living entities. is a form of surrender, but it's surrendering in the wrong direction. We're surrendering to the energy of the Lord instead of the Lord. Most people worship the energy. They worship Durga Devi in India, the material energy, the scientists, the mundane philosophers, the sense endurers, all worshipping the material energy. Knowingly or unknowingly, that's what's going on. Glorifying people, glorifying countries, glorifying themselves, glorifying their achievements, glorifying, mundane people from the past and present, and so on and so forth. And this is all worshipping Maya. Quite something. Huh? The living entity, as will be explained in the 7th chapter, is one of the energies of the Lord, but it's distinct from the material energy, which is also his energy, but that's inferior. Somehow the superior nature, the living entity, has been in contact with material nature since time immemorial. The temporary body, this is chapter 5, text 14. The temporary dwelling place which he obtains is the cause of activities and their resultant reactions. Us in the office, I don't know how to stop the phone ringing. Phone here. I can see the French devotees laughing. Yes, thank you. Goodbye. The temporary body or material dwelling place which he obtains is the cause of varieties of activity and the resultant reactions. It's just like if you get into a plane, an aeroplane, you could say an element of choice there, but not a big variety. You can walk, we can only walk up and down the aisle. And you're only with the people you're with. You can't say, I don't like you, will you please get out of the way, get off the plane, I want to put someone else there. You don't have any choice. I don't like the toilet, I want another toilet. You only have one toilet. It's the same. Well, what would you like for lunch? Well, you only got a choice between chicken and ham or something, and beef and eggs or something. You haven't got any choice. Maybe they've got more choices nowadays. They've got vegetarian plate. You can have some onions and garlic or something. You only can eat what they give you. You're on there. You bought the ticket. You paid the price. You only get what you pay for. So you're on that plane. If you're in the first class compartment, you might get a bit more choice, but you're still limited. You're still on the plane. You can't get off. You die if you try to get off. You can't do it. You're limited. You're like that. We're stuck in this body which we've acquired. We purchased it, you could say, in that sense, by our desire, by our identification. So in that sense, we're responsible. But when you're on it, you can't say, I made the plane, I made the seat, I made the food, I made the toilet, I made the people who are sitting in here, I made this, I made that. No, you're experiencing it. You may enjoy it or not enjoy it, but you're no choice. You're in it. You can say no to it, you can say yes to it, but you've got very little choice outside of that. It is ignorance. Living in such a conditional atmosphere, one suffers the results of the activities of the body by identifying himself with the body. It is ignorance acquired from time immemorial that is the cause of bodily suffering and distress. That ignorance is thinking, I am this material body. I'm identifying myself with this world. This is mine. That's the ignorance. As soon as the living entity becomes aloof from the activities of the body, he becomes free from the reactions as well. As long as he is in the city of the body, he appears to be the master. It becomes free of it. It doesn't affect you. Like I was on the plane flying over the Bay of Bengal. We weren't affected. Down below, there was a tremendous storm and everyone was suffering like hell. But we didn't, well, I mean, other than the fact that we took a little longer on the journey, we didn't feel anything much. A few bumps, nothing much, because we flew around from it. We weren't way above it, but we were apart from it. But actually, he is neither proprietor nor controller of its actions and reactions. He's simply in the midst of the material ocean, struggling for existence. That's another good example. If you find yourself dropped in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or even a small body of water, the English Channel, or something like that, the Bay of Bengal, It's quite a big one. But I mean, in the middle of that, you're going to be in a really precarious position. You have no hope practically, unless someone comes along and saves us. We can't swim out of that situation. We're in a helpless situation. But when you're above the water, the effect of the water, I mean, there may be some fear of falling back into it, but the actual direct effect of that ocean no longer affects us, even if we're just 2 feet above it. Only the fear aspect may be there, or maybe some of the heat, whatever, or cold, whatever it may have. But basically, we're not directly affected by it anymore. We're out of it. We may sometimes laugh at it, but we have to be careful. Prabhupada tells a story one time of the wet stool, dry stool, cow dung. In India, people, they cook with cow dung, you know, at least in the villages. It's really good. We've even done it here in France, very rarely, but it's on occasion. And it's really wonderful what you cook on cow dung. It has a completely different taste and effect. So natural. So anyway, people use cow dung, they wet cow dung and they pop it on the wall. They put patties on the wall, the house, the clay wall, the house, they put the patty there. And when it's nice and dry, they put it on the fire and cook or heat up, maybe use it for heating also. And the wet cow dung is going, and the dry cow dung is going into the fire. And the wet cow dung on the wall is laughing and laughing. Ha 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 ha. Just see, ha ha ha. You're getting burned. I'm okay. I'm safe. I'm here on the wall. But don't forget, it's going to get dry soon. And you're going to be in the fire also. So you may be better situated than someone else in the material world, and we may feel contented as such. We may not, depending on the modes of nature we're in. But sooner or later, we're going to be in the fire too. That's the nature of this material world. He is simply in the midst of the material ocean, struggling for existence. The waves of the ocean are tossing him, and he has no control over them. His best solution is to get out of the water by transcendental Krishna consciousness. It's the best solution. That alone will save him from all turmoil. Nice word, turmoil. This world, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj says, this world is simply turmoil and annoyance. That's all it's made of. That's its constitution. We'll read another verse. This time is ticking by. A couple of more verses I didn't manage to find at the last minute here. And this is in the 14th chapter, text 19. 14:19. Krishna says, I think it's 19. When one properly sees that in all activities, no other performer is at work other than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes, he attains my spiritual nature. Knowledge. Becoming transcendental is one thing to know the process of transcending is another thing to apply that process. And that's when Bhagavad Gita gives us indications how we can begin to apply it. And according to, of course, we're all individuals, we're all in different conditions, so maybe details may vary, but the principle is there, the path of transcendence, transcending it, how we realize our situation is transcendental to the modes of material nature. One can transcend all the activities of the modes of nature simply by understanding them properly, by learning from the proper souls. And there is an application, a real practical application of activities, behavior, utilizing our whatever we've got in such a way that gradually we will transcend by the grace of Krishna. The real spiritual master is Krishna, and he's imparting this spiritual knowledge to Arjuna. In the 4th chapter, Krishna says, one who applies himself to this knowledge realizes this knowledge in due course of time, that we're not this body, we are eternal spirit souls, fragmental part and parcel of Krishna. It's a realization, not just a theory. But that comes by practically applying the process according to our situation. Similarly, it is from those who are fully in Krishna consciousness that one has to learn this science of activities in terms of the modes of nature. Otherwise, one's life will be misdirected. By the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, a living entity can know of his spiritual position, know of his material body, his senses, how he is enwrapped, and how he is under the spell of the modes of nature. He's helpless, being in the grip of these modes. But when he can see his real position, then he can attain to the transcendental platform. Having the scope for spiritual life. Actually, the living entity is not the performer of different activity. He is forced to act because he is situated in a particular type of body. That's easy to see with the animals, the birds, the insects, the trees, and so on. They're kind of more or less forced by the nature that they required. And in human life, when a human being also comes under the same influence, he's not really any better than an animal. The purpose of human life is to change that means of perception or that means of reaction to circumstances. And the scriptures give us the direction how we can do that. Spiritual masters, sadhus, they give us guidance how we can do that. And if we listen, if we hear from them and refer to them again and again, then we can step by step become free from the influence of the modes of nature. He is forced to act. Unless one has the help of a spiritual authority, he cannot understand in what position he is actually situated, even in the material sense. With the association of a bona fide spiritual master, he can see his real position, and by such an understanding, he can become fixed in full Krishna consciousness. A man in Krishna consciousness is not controlled by the spell of the material modes of nature. It has already been stated in the 7th chapter that one who has surrendered to Krishna is relieved from the activities of material nature. Very hard to get out of the modes of nature. Those who surrender unto me can easily cross beyond it. Krishna says, surrender to Krishna. What does he want? Surrender. It has already been stated. For one who is able to see things as they are, the influence of the modes of nature gradually cease. Learning to see things for what they really are. Knowledge. Opening our eyes. And the last verse I'm going to read is, maybe 2 verses here, maybe 3. This next verse, when the embodied being is able to transcend these 3 modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distress, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. So that's pretty reassuring. We can enjoy nectar even in this life if we're able to transcend the modes of nature. Then Krishna, Arjuna asks, what are the symptoms of one who's transcended? And one of those symptoms in the next verse, number 22, I guess, 23, 24, some one of those verses, says, knowing that the mode, Krishna says, knowing one of the symptoms, he knows that the modes alone are active. He's not the doer. You're not the doer. So that's that. I think I'm going to leave it at that for now. It's 10:25 here. So whatever it is there, I don't know. It's getting late. So maybe there's some questions and comments. This is a subject matter which is, you could say, never ending. As long as we're in the material world, it has relevance at different levels. And for everyone else who's in the material world, it has 100% relevance. How to change our means of perception. And it's not about reforming the world. That may be helpful. If it's helpful, just like ISKCON is as valuable as its value is to the extent that it helps us to transcend. It's not all about being in some kind of institution. It's about being in a Sangha, which helps us to transcend the modes, which reminds us of our spiritual identity, which engages our senses. Of course, there's a benefit even in ignorance, but ultimately that's not the purpose. Is to transcend, to engage our senses fully in devotional service, and to develop Krishna conscious love of Godhead, ultimately. It just takes a little time. That's the purpose of the movement, to step by step work towards the objective goal, to love God, to love Krishna. So maybe there's some questions or not, I don't know. Give you a little time. Here's one, Gauridas Prabhu in York. Haribo Gauridas Prabhu, he's always eager, very eager to hear and chant the holy name. and to understand more deeply Srila Prabhupada's giving us revelation of the Shastra. We all know it's so important to get up in the early hours of the morning and be engaged in one's sadhana. That is being in the mode of goodness. Sometimes we are so tired, and if we get up too early, we cannot focus on our sadhana. What is more important? Take little extra rest and wake up adequately refreshed, or keep to the routine and get up early. This is interesting because I had last night a very turbulent night. I didn't have a proper night of sleep, and I couldn't rest, and I did rest eventually, maybe 2 or 3 hours before this class. And I woke up and I didn't know if I was going to be able to stay awake. When I got up, I felt like falling over. I hobbled to the bathroom and managed to, and finally decided when I was in the bathroom I would stay up. I was in two minds. And I decided to stay awake, try to stay so-called awake, try to stay up, and I took a bath, came down for the class. And then I prepared for 5 or 10 minutes before starting the class, some verses. And so what's more important? Now, this is an interesting topic. Again, it's one of those subject matters which may vary according to time and circumstance. We have our goals and we have our present needs. So a little common sense there has to be applied as well. For instance, especially if you're working during the day and you're very, very tired, for whatever reason it may be, maybe you took a late rest, had disturbed sleep, not feeling very well, ate too much rice at 10 o'clock at night. I don't know what the reasons may be. The baby was crying all night, whatever it may be. Somehow or other you're tired. So you have to judge. We're not living like, say in the cave, the Babaji, you can just, it doesn't matter, you just keep going until you drop. We have other things to do in our lives. Now, that you have to bear in mind, especially if you have to drive a car, you cannot be tired. That's a priority. So as I say, sometimes there's details involved. And if you have to do a job in the day, you can't sit there all day long falling asleep. You'll soon lose your job or make big mistakes. Or whatever it is you have to see. Or if you get sick by forcing yourself to stay awake when you're too tired. We have to know what we need. I mean, that may vary according to over a period of time, but generally speaking, know what we need and do the needful. Do the needful. Prabhupada said 6 hours, but then he said, if you need more, you take more. 7, 8 hours, whatever you need. We have to use our common sense there, learn from our experiences. So if you have to get up a little bit later in order to achieve your duties during the day, then you have to do what you have to do. You get up as early as you can and do what we can. If you can go to bed earlier, all the better. Maybe you can get up earlier. I can't speak for you, but maybe it's possible to readjust like that. It's also possible you have to, in the beginning stages particularly, give some break there. You can't just tell the mind, shut up all the time. We're going to plow through no matter what. You can do things like say, okay, we're going to make a schedule. We're going to get up early so we can chant, but we're going to take a rest at 7 o'clock for 1 hour. So don't worry too much. Otherwise, you're going to be so tired and mental that you're not going to be able to do your sadhana anyway. You're going to be like, thinking, you get awake, should I sleep? Should I get up? Should I stay awake? Should I go for a walk? Should I take another cold shower? Should I do this? Should I do that? Put some water in my eyes, jump up and down. And then you're falling asleep. It's just like, there's not much effect, if any, positive effect. Yes, the morning hours, early morning hours are in the mode of goodness, but are we yet in the mode of goodness? Are we in the mode of goodness when we go to bed at 11:30 at night and expect to get up at 4 in the morning and stay awake all day? Not exactly. So, it's working on step by step towards that. And of course, transcendentally speaking, it doesn't depend on the modes of nature. It's an automatic thing that we won't want to waste a moment always chanting my holy names. But when in the stage where we're still influenced by the modes of nature, we have to try to apply the mode of goodness, not just to the period of the day, which is labeled the mode of goodness, but to the whole day. So we act in such a way as to facilitate our taking advantage of the modes of goodness in the morning as much as we can. But if it's not possible yet, or it isn't possible because of our work or family situation, we have to do the needful, and you have to take extra rest. You have to do that. Otherwise you won't be able to perform properly, you won't be able to chant attentively. The desire, see, Krishna reciprocates with that desire. The desire is to be there. The desire is to do it. But we're not yet quite there. So we try to start with what we can, do what we can do, and work forward. Don't imitate. Don't try to be a paramahamsa when we're still, something else down the lane. But if we can adjust our schedule so that we can get up early in the morning and read and chant, that's great. That's the best thing, by far and away. But not at the expense of our having an accident or falling asleep during the day all the time, or chanting, totally inattentive rounds, or falling asleep on the Bhagavatam and drooling all over the pages, whatever we do. I've seen it happen sometimes. It's not good. So we do the needful, try to take rest earlier, try not to eat at midnight. Sometimes you have to if that's your work schedule, but try to avoid that so you're a little fresher in the morning. Hare Krishna. Please, there is one also from Scotland. Dear Mother Sevita Prabhu, what do you advise about vaccination? Can it help us to carry on with our service by keeping the body in working order? I don't know. I honestly don't know, and I don't know if anyone honestly does know. But I do know one thing: if you want to travel, or if your duty absolutely requires it, you may have to do it anyway. But as far as the, pros and cons of it are concerned, I really don't know. We don't know, and it's not enough to say long term what the effects will be. Even doctors are not sure. Scientists may make out they're sure, some are, some aren't. It's not just people who are fanatical, anti-institutionalist, but persons in knowledge are also not absolutely sure. Many can't say. But then again, we can say the same thing about just about everything in this material world. We're not even sure that going on an airplane is good for your health. That that we're not even sure that taking medicine is good for your health, or we're going, it's not everything. The food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, the type of bed we sleep on, the people we associate, the things we watch on the TV, there's so many things which are, in one sense, much worse of a dilemma. Although we don't see them, we become conditioned to accept them as norms, but they can be, maybe they're not destructive, maybe they are, but they can be much more destructive than the effects of a vaccine. If there is any negativity involved in it, I don't know. But there's so many things which do have negativity involved, but we accept them as part and parcel of our lives. We walk around with these monsters, mobile phones on our ears half the time, radiation blasting, blitzing our brains, and it's normal. Say, Levi, how it affects our brains and our ability to focus and our ability to, think clearly, etc. I don't know, but I'm sure it doesn't do good. And most of the food we eat is just basically, what do they call it? And modified, engineered, this thing, that thing. So many things in our Kali Yuga. Everything in the age of Kali, Kalir Doshanade Rajanasya Kaman Kirtan. Nothing is right. It's not that this is right, that's right. They're both wrong. It's like it's a Kali Yuga. You can't get a perfect situation. There's no utopia situation. So do the needful, get on with it, but chant Hare Krishna. Keep chanting Hare Krishna, whatever. And there's no need to go on big campaigns and things like this. If people make their choices, informative choices, they can do what they like. You do the needful. If it does make you feel better, if it does make you feel more protected, that's your choice. And if you need to do it for your service, that's your choice. I know a lot of people are, in between, and some people are this side and some people are that side. Publicity is this way, and Some people are that way, and there's a lot of friction taking place. A lot of friends and enemies are being created. Even people who were previously your friends, and now you're questioning their relationships. It's another symptom of Kali Yuga, creating duality. You got to rise above the duality. Even if you rise above duality, you still got to act in such a way as to act within the duality. So you do the needful according to your circumstance. For some people, it may be necessary. For some, it may not. It's not right or wrong. Do the needful. I'm not gonna locate myself there. How do I feel with the guilty consciousness caused by my past deeds? Or can I use it in taking more shelter of Guru and Krishna? We have to try to make everything positive in Krishna consciousness. If you read many of the songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for instance, if you look at it without knowledge of the situation, you might think that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has some serious psychological problems. He should see, a psychologist or therapist or counselor or something or another. He seems to be condemning himself as lower than a worm in stool. He has no good feelings towards anyone else. He feels ecstatic when other people are miserable and miserable when they're happy. He's considered himself the most sinful creature on the planet, condemned to rot. You could take it like that if you take it out of context or in the wrong context. So why is he doing all of this? Why isn't he saying, I'm a spirit soul, everything's blissful, we should just chant Hare Krishna? Well, he does that too. But a lot of the time it's like, boom, 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 down there in the, I feel so bad. I'm useless. I'm such a sinner. I'm so wicked. No one is more wicked than me. On and on it goes. You think, my goodness, has he got low self-esteem? I've never met such a person with such low self-esteem, but it's not, because it's based on another platform of knowledge, and from his case, realization. So how do we purify, as you say in the second part of your statement there, or question, taking shelter of Krishna? Whatever we are, we're not. Don't forget. That's just the effects of illusion or ignorance. That much we can say. We're in ignorance, we're in illusion. So to recognize the effects of that being in ignorance. Now, that is one thing to recognize. It's not, again, you don't have to identify with that, but you recognize, yes, because of my ignorance, my false ego, I've been absorbed or covered by sinful body, sinful behavior, sinful this, or whatever you want to call it. But therefore, we don't identify with that. Oh, I'm just a sinner. Okay. But what does it mean? It means because of my ignorance, I fall under the influence of the modes of nature, and the result of that is my activities have become very sinful. But that's not me. That's just my stupidness of falling under the modes of nature and identifying in such a way that the result has become I've got a sinful mind and a sinful body, and I'm acting sinfully. Or the body is acting in such a way that I'm experiencing sinful environment, etc. It's not us. So it's to realize that it's not us. Now, of course, what we can do with that situation may vary. We're very sinful. We can't give this up. We can't give that up. We react in such and such a way. So what do we do then? So the next thing is the mood, which Bhaktivinoda shows, is one of repentance. That I'm very sorry that I fell under the modes of nature in such and such a way. And then what we're going to do about it. Not just a lament. Lamentation is not a limb of Bhakti Yoga. Repentance it's not the same thing. Lamenting is feeling sorry for oneself. Repentance is a genuine feeling of recognition that I turned away from Krishna, and now I'm very sorry for that, and now I'm going to turn towards you, my Lord. So yes, the second part of that is to take shelter of Krishna and to act accordingly, to not to be arrogant and proud and duplicitous and hypocritical, angry, and condemning people, condemning the modes, condemning devotees, condemning Krishna. Sometimes it happens. Why is this happening to me? and so on. Humility. So it's easy to say, it's hard to do, but it's the attitude which we have in these situations rather than necessarily only the activity or the mechanics of how we react to these situations. Is our attitude of repentant attitude is called anuttapa. Burning within the heart is described as anuttapa, this repentant feeling where we take shelter of Krishna in a helpless situation of dependence on the Lord. And that burns out the very cause of our being encased in this world, no matter what mode. Sometimes being in a bad situation is better than a good one because it's a little easier to identify that as being, what we say as being unwanted situation. A little easier to be free of pride. And not always that pride can manifest in anger or things like that, but generally it's a little easier when we're in a poor situation. Please, how to cry out. Who's this from? Amala Bhakta. How to cry out of hopelessness due to rascal false ego, cheating us in a million ways, isn't it? How to cry out in hopelessness, helplessness, hopelessness. There's hope against hope, huh? Rupa Goswami talks about hope against hope in the Nectar of Devotion. In one sense, we have no hope. And how to cry out to Krishna in helpless, hopeless, like a child crying for its mother. As long as we're still taking shelter of the material defense, the material shelter, the material senses, sense objects, etc., we cannot cry with helplessness. I think Queen Kunti talks about that in her prayers. As long as one is still, attracted, or and maybe Vaccination, I can't remember the verse; it's slipping my mind. But one's prayers, one's is not sincere. As long as we're still attracted to this material world, like materially speaking, people they get into difficulty. Oh God, save me! Help God, Krishna! And as soon as they're free, if they do get free, then back they go again. They do the same stupid thing usually. And then again, Krishna. Yes. When we wake up. And the little realization that, wait a minute, although I'm not the doer, I'm still one of the causes of the action being done, in the sense that I'm still relating in the same stupid way. I'm still attached to it. And consequently, I haven't learned that lesson yet. I'm still experiencing the same thing over and over again. So how to get out of that cycle, that circle? Well, that's the process of devotional service, full devotional service. And we have the association of devotees. Sometimes you do, if you step through our path of devotion, sometimes you just have to say no. Bhaktisiddhanta said sometimes you have to bash it with a shoe, with a stick. Sometimes we have to say no. And we certainly have to take shelter of Krishna, because without his mercy, we cannot overcome the modes of nature. It's not possible, only by your mercy. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur said in the Harinam Chintamani, I think it's Harinam, it is impossible for the living entity to become free of the effects of inattention. We're talking of one subject, it could be any subject here, by his own endeavor, by one's own solitary endeavor. It's impossible. We can try, but it's impossible to become free. It's only possible by the mercy of Krishna. Therefore, one should fervently, it means, as you say, calling out, fervently call out to the Lord for his mercy. There is no other way. You begin where you are, and if you don't feel you're hopeless, you can pray to the Lord. May my prayers or my calls to you become genuine. I'm not genuine. I'm still really wanting material things in return, and I know theoretically at least I shouldn't do. And I really have a part of me which I'd like to become Krishna conscious, but really a lot of me wants to remain in the material world, and I still want to see myself as the enjoyer, etc., etc., etc. So we can at least begin by repeating. This is why there are two kinds of prayers, notable prayers and heartfelt prayers. They can both go along. Notable prayers is repetition of the prayers of pure devotees who pray. Of course, we could say it's from their own hearts, but they're praying particularly for us. Bhagavatam is full of such prayers. Even Gita has prayers. Notable prayers, by repeating those notable prayers, this also has a purifying effect on our hearts to release us from, the duplicity in so-called devotion. And heartfelt prayers, honest prayers from where we're at, where we want to get. I'm in this fallen condition right now. I know I'm not sincere. I know that I'm not praying honestly. I'm not calling out in a helpless state. I should be, but I'm not, because I'm still attached. My Lord, you know my heart. You know what's best for me. Please, please, my Lord. You know I can't jump straight away into pure devotional service or whatever it is. Please help me, my Lord. You know what's best for me. And you know what I can take. Please help me. Something heartfelt can be there. And you don't have to imitate. When you imitate, sometimes we fall over. I only want pure devotional service right now. Please take away everything, my Lord, right now, which is an impediment to my path. Sounds nice. Maybe some people are ready for that, but not everyone's ready for that. Please engage me in your service, my Lord. A service which is appropriate for removing whatever obstacles are on my path. That you can pray. It may not be with hopelessness, helplessness, but it can be with a little genuine honesty and positivity. We're not, the pure platform. We should be, but we're not. When we associate with people we are, it can awaken it more and more. When we try to chant the Maha Mantra purely, that's a notable prayer, and it can become a heartfelt one too. But this is the special prayer which the Lord appears in the form of, which we can take shelter of. We just try to hear the sound of the holy name as clearly as we can and attentively as we can. That will automatically awaken the various, attitudes and emotional responses which are favorable for our next step of progress. Krishna awakens them. When we take shelter of him, we start to wake up. We start to realize what it means to be hopeless and helpless. We realize we have no other shelter. We realize that, whatever it is we need to realize, so we actually do take shelter of Krishna, and not just, we can say, on the surface, but deeper and deeper and deeper in our hearts. Realizing there is no other shelter other than the holy name of Krishna. More and more. And then it will become more and more helpless, hopeless, if you want to use that word, prayer or chanting. More and more and more. And next, a helpless man can feeling. Thank you, Rasikana. A helpless man can feelingly utter the holy name of the Lord, whereas a man who utters the same holy name in great material satisfaction cannot be so sincere. So but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying. We just have to realize we're not there yet. Take the appropriate steps. Try to chant for 16 rounds or whatever you're doing, the best as we can. Try to hear the sound of the name, kirtan. As much kirtan as you can. That is the Yuga Dharma, kirtan. And try to absorb ourselves in kirtan, and gradually, it will, the result by Krishna's grace, unless we're really duplicitous, will be that somehow or another it will start to have some inner realizations. And you're already getting some, otherwise you wouldn't ask that question in the first place. It's one of the stages. We ask the question first, and the more we're sincere, the more Krishna gives the answer. I think that's it. Is that it, Rasika? Have I missed anything? There's another verse by Vaccination is quoted here. Thank you. My Lord, your Lordship can easily be approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. One who is on the path of mature progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty, cannot approach you with sincere feeling. So read that verse. Read the prayers of Queen Kunti. They're praying for us. Whether she needs to for herself or not, it's not our business. She's a transcendental, eternal associate of the Lord. But certainly we can understand it's for our business. They make these prayers. Take advantage of them. Nice. She's crying out helplessly to the Lord. Devahuti is crying out helplessly to the Lord. Arjuna is crying out helplessly to the Lord. You're my only shelter. You're the axe by which you can cut down this tree of material existence. Repeat their prayers. Study it. Meditate on it. And chant Hare Krishna with all your heart. Yeah. You're doing great. Thank you all so very much. We just have a kirtan and sign off. And you can, I'm sorry to say, but this particular encasing which I'm in, I'm not transcendental to it, and it needs sleep. And somehow or another, Krishna's kindness, he's kept me awake for the last couple of hours. And but it probably, I would want to, this happens almost every week. I really want to go on Harinam Sankirtan with the devotees, but usually I'm so tired that it's just not realistic. I went a few weeks ago with the Harinam. I lasted 1 hour. I had to take rest. So, and I did go for 3 days last week on Harinam Sankirtan in Paris, 2 days in Paris, I think, and 1 day in another town. And as much as we can, perform Sankirtan. If you can't sleep, you have to sleep. I know one of my most dear godbrothers, he has, he's an initiating spiritual master, sannyasi. He has what's it called? Fatigue syndrome, something like that. It's called something like fatigue syndrome. And he can't stay awake. He sleeps maybe 12 hours a day. But the other 12 hours, he's constantly chanting and hearing, nonstop. So whatever little we got, they're not the controllers. Whatever we can do, just use it. If you can only stay awake 5 minutes, use it. If you don't need to sleep at all, great. Do the needful. And just fill up whatever time. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that. He said, Kirtaniya Siddhahari for Grihasthas means whatever time you do have, you use it in devotional service, that's all. You got your duties to your family, you got your jobs, you've got things to do, you've got sleep, you need to eat, you got to do things. But whatever time you do have, fill it up with hearing and chanting. He said that for a householder is the path of Kirtaniya Siddhahari. It's not 24 hours a day, we can't do that maybe. At least we can utilize what time we have in nicely hearing and chanting the holy name of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Bolo, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Gaur Premanandi, Hare Hare Bo, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Hari Nam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Maha Mantra Ki Jai, Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Please distribute as many of Prabhupada's books as you can. This is a sure way of pleasing Srila Prabhupada. We may not be very expert at anything. We may not be very advanced. We may still have our material desires. We may still be affected by the result of having, under the influence of the false ego. We may still have many, many faults, but do what you can to please Prabhupada. That will definitely please Krishna, and he will definitely shower his mercy. Whatever form is required, try to distribute Prabhupada's books. I know many of you are online today. Many of you are engaged in distributing the holy name or books or the prasadam. Everyone's doing it to some extent, but maybe we can do a little better. Maybe we can carry some books in our handbag when we go out to the shop, or when we go to the doctor, or when we go somewhere to work, wherever it is. Maybe Krishna will be very, let's say, reciprocal. And perhaps somebody will meet somebody and we realize I can give a book to them. Whether they give a donation or not, at least we can try to give someone a book, or try to get them to chant Krishna's name, or give them a cookie. Make a cookie. Make some cookies. Take them out with you. Offer them to Krishna and give them to people. People like prasad. You don't even have to say this is prasad. You could say this is just a homemade cookie. I'd like to share it with you. Whatever it is. Something. Try to connect people to Krishna. In this way, Krishna will connect himself more and more to us. Do what you can to spread Krishna consciousness. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Bo. Hari Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bo.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Everybody. Hari Bo.
Thank you,
I can see the
Gurudev.
boys in
Thank you,
Soho
Gurudev.
Thank you,
Street.
Guru Maharaj. Thank you.
One devotee in
Hare
Soho
Krishna.
Street. Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol,
Wonderful
Guru Maharaj.
temple in Soho. The boys in
Maharaj,
Czech
Hari
Republic,
Bol.
in London, in Fiji, in Ireland, in Australia, in Germany, I don't know, in Malaysia, in Slovakia, in Australia, New Zealand, and all kinds of different places there, Philippines, and France, and Holland, and maybe Philippines, you know, wonderful. Everybody, wherever you are, Hare Krishna. Russia,
Hare
all the way
Krishna.
from Russia with love. Hare Krishna. India, India ki jai. Everybody, wherever you are. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much for being with us. And I
Hare
pray
Krishna.
that Krishna will protect you all and inspire you, whatever situation we're in, inspire you to take shelter of his lotus feet. Hare Krishna. Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Where are you,
Hare
Shribani?
Krishna.
Where is Shribani? I'm sure I don't know where you are. Where are you, Shribani? Can you say where you are? Can you type it or something? Where is Shribani? I don't know where you are. He's not hearing, maybe.
He's from New Zealand, Guru Maharaj.
Huh?
New Zealand. Yeah.
Shribani is in New Zealand. Hari Bol, Shribani. Hari Bol, Vasudasika. Hare Krishna, all glories to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thank you, Gurudev.
Hari Bol.
Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna, Maharaj.